Good morning. When I first proposed and filmed this video, I sort of thought that it was going to be a Kristine learns to spin for the first time, and I invited a most knowledgeable guest to come, who we will see in a moment. But it turns out that I'm a really bad newbie, because I couldn't quite resist the temptation of checking out this person's videos extensively and pretty much learning the basics on my own. And that meant that I ended up being a lot more tempted by my guests' expertise rather than them teaching me how to spin. So while this is my first time spinning, this video is a lot more about spinning history, spinning context, and all that sort of fun stuff. But with that in mind, I still hope you very much enjoy. But I don't actually know anything about spinning, so to help me with that, I have invited my good friend Evie to come help me. Evie, welcome to the channel.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I love to talk about spinning, so I can't wait to talk about spinning.
Excellent. How much does the weight of the spindle determine the thickness of the yarn?
Okay, that's a question that I am so excited to talk about. I have things to say. Are you ready for the things?
Yes, nerd out. We love nerding out.
Yeah, so spindle sticks are kind of tricky because spindle sticks are made of wood, and so that's the thing that rots first. And so we don't have a whole lot of evidence of spindle sticks, and the sticks that we do have are fairly degraded and difficult to get a lot of information from. But what we've been able to ascertain from what we do have is that it's some of them had notches at the top, like how you have like a little hook. There is possibly some evidence that some did have a little metal hook in Norse contexts. Yeah, so we have also different wear marks, which the whorls that people were using were removable. And so they could kind of see if they, you know, when you put the whorl on the stick, this is just a little bit of clay, you can kind of see where it wears on the stick when you take that on and off, right? So we can kind of get an idea, like if there's a hook on one side and there's wear marks on the other, then we might know that they were putting that whorl on the bottom of that stick. And if there's wear marks on the top and a hook on the top, we might know that they were putting it at the top. You know, or maybe they did both. Who knows? I find that, you know, sometimes when I have the whorl on the bottom, it is more stable. So if I'm outside spinning and it's very windy, I get less of this kind of action happening because it's at the bottom. It kind of swings like one full pendulum. When I have it at the top, it starts to wobble like this sometimes. And so having it up here is faster, but less stable. So if I put it at the bottom, it's more stable. So who knows? I mean, was it a cultural thing? Was it just people interacting with like the physical world around them and observing physics? So these are all questions that we don't have 100% answers to, but we do have some good ideas.
And I was going to say, when you talked about that sticks deteriorate, I was thinking about, of course, like the golden thread where Cassia talks about Egyptian spinners, who we have like pictorial evidence of them probably spinning on their thighs, which would leave no evidence. So, of course, how are the tools that do survive very much reflectant on, oh, these happen to be made out of materials that more easily survived, rather than these were the dominant tools.
Absolutely. And there are some things about spinning that we just kind of know have to be universally true because we're dealing with physical motion, right? Like gravity is going to exist and momentum is going to exist. So, you know, these things have to be true no matter when you're spinning.
Yeah.
So the question of the weight of the whirl affecting the yarn that you spin? Is an excellent question. And reenactors have done like timed in studies, in like, you know, experimental archaeology kinds of studies to figure out how much time it would take people to do the things to make the textiles. So it takes a long time, first of all. Spinning is just laborious. It takes time. But that was one of the things that they determined was the weight of the whirl. The heavier the weight, the thicker the yarn, was sort of the correlation that they came up with. That's kind of true in my personal experience as a spinner, but my whole thing is I can spin to any standard of thickness that I want within a certain tolerance, with a variety of weight on my spindle stick. It's the skill of the spinner that has a lot of influence over the thickness of the yarn. It's also the density of the whirl, because it's not just going to be a question of how heavy is the stress that you're putting on the yarn as it's being formed. It's also going to be a question of that burst of speed. So as you give it a flick, how many twists are you getting for each flick? Well, that's also going to be determined by the mass of it, but also the radius of it and the distance from the center of the stick, the center of rotation, and your distance to the outer edge of the whirl. So if you have something that's much more of a disc shape, that's much wider, versus something that's more compact, you could have those two things with the exact same mass, but they're going to affect that twist differently because one has a larger diameter. So there's, and these are physics, like these are physics problems. Like you can put numbers to these things and there are equations to define these things. This is, you know, the mechanics of how these things work. So there's a lot going on, and I think there's a lot more that needs to be studied and addressed than what we've gotten so far, which is exciting. Open questions in archaeology are really exciting, I think.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
I'm not saying anything that's been, you know, none of it's wrong. I think there's just more to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and that's another thing I'd like to mention, if I may.
Yes.
We work, and I know you have wool that you're working with right now. We work so much in a modern crafting context with wool that I feel like we don't entirely have a good grasp of the amount of linen that was being spun. Because the underdresses that people wore seem to, from a lot of, you know, finds and evidence and stuff, likely have been linen. Of course, linen as a cellulose fiber degrades just like the spindle sticks too. But there was a lot of linen. There was a lot of flax being spun. And when you spin flax, it helps to spin it wet. And so you'll like lick your fingers while you spin it or run it through your mouth. Because there's enzymes in your saliva that interact with the pectins in the flax, and that helps to smooth it down and make it a nice strong string to weave with or do whatever with. So if you have it and you're doing that little half hitch thing over the top of a stick with linen, and it's, you know, getting gooey from that enzyme interaction, then you take that little thing off the top there and it's real sticky. So guess what solves that problem? A little hook.
Clever.
So,
people are so clever.
So that, I mean, that's just a hands-on thing I figured out. So all the ones that I have with hooks, they're all full of linen right now.
Yeah, since it worked, right? When it works,
It
why
works
not?
really well.
But you are going to talk to me about distaffs. You have one and I don't. What's the difference? What do we use this for?
Okay, having a distaff is like having a third hand. It really is. So when I first started, I was like, distaff? Psh, no one needs that. People were just doing extra back in the day. But the thing is, people didn't do any extra than what they had to do. People did things that made them efficient. And distaffs, it turns out, actually make spinning very efficient. Even with wool. And I know a lot of people like to spin wool without a distaff. They think that distaffs are just for linen, for flax. Which distaffs are pretty essential if you're spinning line flax because it's so long, right? You can't draft it because there's just so much of the length there. You can't reach the staple length of it reasonably. And wool is so much shorter. You can reasonably, you know, attenuate the staple length between your hands to draft the staple length between your hands, right? It works. So a lot of people think that distaffs are just for linen, but it turns out that the shape of the spindle whorls that we have discovered is what gives it away. Because so many of the whorls are so close to that center of rotation, they get a very fast burst of speed when they get flicked. But it's over very fast as well, which means that having a spindle that's just dangling down, right? You give that a burst, you give it a flick. By the time you've gone back to your wool with both of your hands to draft it out, and again, it's not wrong. You can make it work, right? We're talking about like the efficiency of a proficient spinner here, right? So don't feel bad. I'm not judging you for not having a distaff. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine.
I don't even have a comb. Like, it's okay. I'm not going to take offense.
And for any reenactors, you know, I don't think it's terrible that people are not using a distaff. But I do personally believe that a distaff would be more authentic to probably the way that people were spinning wool. Back to the flax thing, because flax is very long. So what is the point of having a shorter distaff? Because if flax is long, you need a longer distaff. So why would they have shorter handheld distaffs? That makes sense for wool.
Yeah.
It means that that ribbon is holding on to, like what your hand is doing.
Yeah.
Your hand that's the furthest up. The distaff is doing that for me.
Ah.
Because it's holding the staple length. And that means that I don't have to worry about my spindle running out of twist and possibly, you know, turning back the other way and then untwisting as I'm working. I can keep my hand on my spindle and I can give it continual bursts of speed, which means that it's also twisting more constantly at its fastest rate of twist. So I really do think that distaffs were extraordinarily common. Also, if you look at different cultures, even when they're spinning wool, if they have distaffs, you know, they would have given them up centuries ago if they were cumbersome or inefficient, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, even if something became culturally significant for some reason, I don't think it would have stuck around just as a cultural thing. It still is work that has to get done. It has to make sense to get the work done.
Yeah. So it does the thing that when you buy, like sometimes you buy wool in like this roll, that is what the distaff is doing. Like it gives you a continuous thing to feed into the spindle. That is really, really cool.
Are you familiar with the items that were found in the Lunberine Pass in the glacier that was melting, one of the things that they found was a stick. And they were like, it's a pretty stick, but we don't know what it was for. I have a replica of it.
Oh, pretty.
And it's beautiful. Like, it's the golden ratio also. You know, this distance is double, or wait, I can't remember. Anyway, there's a mathematical symmetry to this that's beautiful. And I've used it as a distaff. And for wool, it was cumbersome and frustrating. And I tried it different ways. And I know people were like, tuck it under your arm. So, you know, I did it tucked under my arm, and that worked fine. And then I put line flax on it. And there were features in the carving that interacted with the flax that made it easier to draft from than any other distaff I have that I've used for flax. And I immediately knew. It was one of those things when it just makes sense. And I thought, yeah, it's a distaff, and they used it for spinning flax. Absolutely. I believe that in my heart.
Oh, that is so cool. that is why you need like
Can
living
I prove
history.
it?
Yeah, that is why you need living history experiments, because you figure this stuff out that you can't by just looking at it. It's just not possible to know just by looking at it. Oh, that is so cool.
I wanted to mention the distaff that I've been using so that people can kind of see what it looks like without the wool. It's similar to this one. It's inspired by the Augsburg burial ship, the distaff that was found there, which is, you know, also probably a distaff, but really just a fancy stick.
Probably. And I noticed that that one also has the like 1, 2, 3. I assume like you would start putting the flax where some of the nuts are, and does where you put stuff on the distaff affect how it like drafts?
Yes. How you load the material onto the distaff makes a huge difference in how it spins. So this actually, when I started this distaff full of wool, when I started it, my hand was completely covered by wool because the wool was all the way down to the bottom. And what I've been doing as I spin is I'm just going around and around and around. And when I take off a layer, I adjust the ribbon that I have tying it on. So it's not just about it being a stick, but it's about how you attach it. It's about how you arrange the fibers to prepare it to be attached to a distaff. It's about how you wrap your ribbon, tablet woven band, which this one isn't, much to my shame. This is a store-bought ribbon. I have one, it's just too long. I need to do a few shorter pieces to make sense with this. I use them on the other one. And also with flax, because it's so long, you can't tie it too tightly because you're holding on to the top of what you're trying to pull out. And so if it's too tight, you're yanking on it to get it off of there, which gives you uneven spots because you'll yank, it lets go, and then you've gone too far before you can slow your tug, if that makes sense. So it's there's so many aspects to it that are so subtle and so nuanced that you don't even consider until you've been doing it with your own two hands. It's like the rabbit hole with no bottom. It just keeps going. But that's the other thing too, is in a modern context, we spin the things we want to spin. We spin the things that are fun for us to spin. We spin for, null binding a cute hat, or pair of mittens, or, for knitting a sweater, or all of these things that are very comfortable to spin for the most part and fun, because we're not going to do this kind of labor if we don't have to. And we don't have the time or the societal structure that we have to. So we're going to pick the things we purchase and the things we do by hand. They had no choice. Every single bit of textile would have been spun by hand. So even if you're spinning something that's coarse and rough that you're going to use to gather straw in a field, you know, you might want a larger, heavier stick to spin the materials to make that thing, or nets, or, you know, those utilitarian kinds of textiles that we don't always think about because we're spinning comfortable things, relatively.
And we don't have to spin, we can spin for fun. Whereas exactly. They couldn't. They had to spin to like clothe and feed and take care of everyone.
Exactly. Every bit of cloth, every bit of cloth. Like, I don't think we spend enough time looking around us at the wealth of cloth we have. Curtains, oh my goodness. I am wealthy because I have cloth that I can just hang on a window just to look pretty.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, tapestries, yeah, decorative, but also keeping a cold castle warm. And all of those kinds of little details.
In the Valkyrie's Loom, I love, there's a part where Michelle, is the author, Michelle Hire Smith, writes about tapestries, because in Norse culture, textile work was very gendered, and women were doing, you know, the bulk, the majority of all the textile work. And she talks about how, like, culturally the men would have poetry and storytelling and all of that kind of thing. And so their literacy was poems and storytelling. And for women, their literacy was the tapestries. And that hit me. You know, that's one of those things that hit me. And I was like, oh yeah, they're gonna tell their stories and their tapestries. That's their expression.
Yeah, exactly. And people are going to express themselves with whatever they have access to. I mean, similar to how a lot of like modern historical stories will disparage women like doing embroidery because they're trying to like be feminist, but actually this is part of how they would be able to express themselves. This is part of the art that they were like, that they could do and how they could express themselves.
Absolutely. There's in the United States, there's a museum that has needlework that I believe is from the colonial period, so like late 1700s, I believe. It might have been into the 1800s. And it's like samplers where they were practicing making letters and different things just as a sampler. Like, look, I can do the stitch. I practiced the stitch. And it was probably a little child who was doing this one, but there's a point where they're like, I hate this. And they stitched in there, I don't like needlework or something like that. Like, you could totally see, like, as an elementary teacher, you know, I would get kids that would make little notes letting me know their feelings about their homework or whatever. And
oh yeah,
a little child did it in her needlework, and I love that so much.
Yeah.
People are people. It doesn't matter when. People do people things.
Yeah, they just keep doing like similar human fun things.
How is your yarn coming along?
Atrocious. It is still very thick. I'm struggling to like draw out without getting all of it stuck in the twist at once. So I just get this like big lump. Some of it, let's see, I had some sections that were better. This one is somewhat thinner. But most of it is very thick and uneven. But I'm having fun though.
I'll tell you a couple encouraging things. Number one, you're making yarn. Oh my goodness. Like, that's amazing. That's what makes studying textiles so hard.
Yeah.
Because you can't use the same hands for every experiment.
Even if we have a quote-unquote heritage or primitive sheep, it still wouldn't be exactly the same. as they had 1,000 years ago, because we know that like cows grew bigger, sheep also grew bigger because we gave them more food. So they would have been slightly different even if their ancestry is comes from those sheep.
There's also sometimes, and especially colonizing type situations, people will show up and say, oh, you have these primitive sheep, we have merinos, they're better, let's breed merinos into your flocks. And they ruin the breeds of sheep. This happened to the Navajo Churro sheep in the Southwest in the United States. And so what happens now is that we have this breed of sheep that has these genetics from, you know, generations and generations ago. But sometimes a lamb will be born. It's not like you get like a 50-50 blend of characteristics. Sometimes a lamb will be born and they call it a throwback because it's born and it's like got all the merino characteristics in its wool.
Oh.
It's like merino wool, and they call that a throwback. So even to this day, even if we think that we've had a completely pure strain of sheep that represents a breed historically, it's impossible.
Yeah. There's too much other stuff going on as well that happens in history.
And the sheep have evolved, and a farmer shows up and says, I want this characteristic at this time or whatever, you know, it's just... So we can estimate some characteristics. Like, of course, the dual coat is a thing. But yeah, sometimes there's differences even in you know, from two lambs from the same mother. One could be a throwback and the other could represent the breed faithfully.
Yeah, but look, we have thinner yarn, slightly thinner yarn anyway. Still not even, but it's thinner. Hey.
It's looking so good.
I imagine if I had better combs, this would be easier, because I mean, I am struggling a little bit with my less than stellar carding.
You asked me about cards.
Yes.
Do you want to know?
I want to know all about the cards.
Cards were invented in France, and they didn't have any cards anywhere until I believe it was the 1400s. I believe it was the 15th century when cards were invented. And the reason they didn't have them before was simply because the technology didn't exist to create the thin wires that you need for the teeth on the cards. On a museum website, I can't remember which museum, they say that it might actually be Norway. I don't know if you'll have to take responsibility for this or not, Kristine. But on this museum website, they say that that Scandinavia didn't want hand cards because they thought it tore up the wool. That it was too aggressive to the wool and it would tear it up. But they don't cite that anywhere, and I haven't seen a reference to it. I don't know when Scandinavia started using hand cards to card wool, but I do know that it for sure would have been after the Viking Age. And there are combs that are discovered in like there was a fort that burned down that had combs that were discovered there. Different burial finds have included combs. And so they for sure had combs, but hand cards not in the Viking Age anywhere, because it just wasn't invented yet. But that said, we need to give a lot of grace, right? Like, if we're doing this for fun, we need to enjoy it. And, you know, these are combs. These are very accurate to what would have existed at the time. These are hazards. These are dangerous. Like, not even just, you know, like, look at these. These are nasty. There's a saint who was martyred with these bad boys. Like, these are weapons. These are horrible. So like, if you have little kids running around, if you're at a Viking market and there's people wandering around, you know, like that's a whole extra set of caution that you need to be really aware of, that you might not want to be bothered with. To have these around, or even just in your house. Like, I didn't use these when my children were little because I didn't want to have an accident. I'm not going to fault anybody for not using those things. If they have reasons not to use them, don't. They're dangerous. If you're buying your wool already prepared because you have time to spin, but you don't have time to prepare it from scratch, fine, do it. You're making yarn. That's the amazing thing. So,
well, this has been so much fun. You need to hop on over to back to your own channel, and we'll see you at some point. But before you go, where can people find you, and what are some exciting projects that you want to share with the audience?
well, thank you. And this has been so much fun. Anytime you want to hang out and spin and chat, let me know because I'm here for it. But my channel is called JillianEve, and people can find me there. I have a lot of videos about spinning, but I'm also doing some other different kinds of projects. And so one of the projects I'm working on, I am doing a replica of Viking Age vodmill. I pronounce things the best I can. I see the words in my mind, but I don't know how they're said out loud because I read so much. Anyway, trade cloth, that's what I'm working on, and that's why I have this Icelandic fleece separated, so that is going to be coming up. The project I'm working on right at this moment is a dress, and I have it's like smocked on the top, and I'm making tablet woven straps for the dress, but it's like a summer dress. It's not like a historical thing. I guess it's like history bounding. So I'm having fun with that. Yeah, so, you know, and then just always spinning and weaving and sewing and just fun things. That's what I'm up to.
That sounds really fun. Well, thank you for coming and teaching us all the different things about, well, many different things about spindles and distaffs and Viking Age and all of the things. And thank you for joining me. Bye.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for watching this, my first ever foray into spinning, and this is definitely something I can see myself doing a lot more of. This is a lot of fun, and I can see how this is very much addicting, but I hope you go all out and check out Evie's channel if you haven't already. Evie is a super sweet human being and super skillful and knowledgeable about all things spinning, but also just nice sewing, cozy hangout videos and talking videos, and just an all-round amazing human being. So please check out her channel if you aren't familiar with her work already. But yeah, that's it for this time, and thank you so much for watching again our very chaotic and fun chat, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!
I could do that, and I could do it like succinctly, so I don't go on and on.
We're succinct? When?
No, I'm saying it's possible.
I'm not sure that seems fairy tale to me.
It probably is, but I'll do my best.